Right, back live tonight on In Focus. The CEO of Business Leadership South Africa says the role of business as a social partner invested in the future of the nation has changed over the past years. In a recent opinion piece, Busisiwe Mavuso argues that the economic future hinges on business partnering genuinely with government to make South Africa good again. She joins us now to shed more light on this idea. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time tonight.
Good evening, Thabo. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So recently the president, I suppose, owning up to the fact that he set himself a timeline to have this social compact be in place. He admitted pretty much that he's missed his timeline. Didn't quite explain to us why he missed the timeline, but he says, look, there are other compacts that are in place. Gender-based violence compact is in place. Minimum wage compact is in place. And some of the other social partners weighing in on this, saying, well, part of what needs to happen, one, is to determine what are the pressing issues that needs to be addressed that are challenging the nation. But also, the social compact process is not complete until you define what is your own role in the success of that compact. Would you say this is a reason why the social compact has not taken off, that I suppose the social partners have not clearly defined what their role is in the success of the compact?
I don't think it is, Thabo. I think, as you rightfully say, the president has actually acknowledged that there are quite a few social compacts in place that have been discussed over the years. I think we therefore need to be looking at what does the acceleration of implementing these look like? What will it require, from all of us as social partners? Where government is failing, how does business need to come to the party? And when you look at it, a lot of these social compacts, and I'm taken back to 2018, I'm thinking about the Jobs Summit social compact that we actually created, that needs a growing economy, to enable us to implement it. Now, when you look at our current environment and you say, what will be required for us to grow the economy? It is very clear, Thabo. I don't even think that we actually need to sit and have a discussion about what are the priorities. We know what the priorities are. The priorities are actually the basics that any investor coming into the country would require. And I think in our case, it's mainly the networking industries. Now, out of the 4 networking industries, 3 are dysfunctional, Thabo, and that is a problem. The only one that is functional is telecommunications. The 3 that are dysfunctional is energy, it's ports and logistics, and water. Now, we really need to look at what are the interventions that are required to be able to ensure, that these network industries are functioning as they should. Because let's be clear, Thabo, no investor will come into an environment where you have to contend with the fact that on some days, on most days, looking at what 2023 looks like, you're going to be sitting with 10 hours of load shedding. The fact that you're going to have ports that are actually not functioning, and you are therefore going to have to import and export your goods through the Maputo port and bring them not by rail but by road into the country. And the fact that we've got a looming water crisis that we're actually contending with as a country. And then the other issue is the issue of lawlessness. The systemic and endemic corruption is really a problematic area. Now, if we need to look at what should our focus be as a country, the president has, for instance, spoken about trying to get 2 trillion rands worth of investment as a new target. And we're having an investment conference next month. We really need to look at what business case are we really giving to investors? What business case are we actually giving to foreign direct investment? What business case are we actually giving to the business community? Right. Because the reality of the situation, when you look at it now, Thabo, you will see that the business that should normally be coming to South Africa is actually going to East Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, and those economies, as less advanced as they are, as small as they are eating South Africa's breakfast. And we really need to look at how, or rather why, what will fixing that look like.
So in that why, or how, in your opinion, piece, you're arguing that the days of if you and I had this conversation, I'm sure we did a number of times in what is now called 9 wasted years, we can argue that. But back then, you were saying policy certainty. Back then, you were saying an enabling environment. Are you saying these are old stories? Is the old story? Are we over that? Have we done that now? Now we need to look at a new role where we are focusing more on how government and private sector are partnering?
No, far from it. So a conducive environment is still very much an issue. And I think at the moment, the new growing concern, Thabo, which is making business confidence to plummet, is political stability. So never mind the fact that we don't have a conducive environment, political stability is a new growing concern. So a conducive environment is going to be facilitated by the implementation of the structural reforms that we've been talking about. And I think if we were to prioritize as a country to say that we need so many reforms to be implemented, where do we start? And I think the view that business has sponsored for quite some time now is that the network industries is where we need to start, which is energy, ports and logistics and water. Because it doesn't matter which industry a business is operating in. It doesn't matter which investor or rather which industry an investor is going to look to invest in. You know, they need the basics to be functioning as they should. Yeah. And the basics that we're talking about are energy, are ports and logistics, as well as water.
Let's talk about energy a little bit. What do you make of the criticism that has been leveled now? I mean, business decided we'll raise 100, is it 100 million? Yeah, I think it's 100 million for NECOM, for the Energy Action Plan. People are saying, why is business giving money to the presidency? Business should be going to treasury and putting that money there. This thing of giving money to the president is a problem. You think you're doing the right thing, you're forming a partnership with the president, but people are complaining.
And I think the article that I've actually penned speaks to exactly that, you know, to say that as much as we still talk about attaining a conducive environment, there is that growing realization from the private sector that if we are going to be able to achieve this, business needs to come to the party in a significant way. And I think the rhetoric question that I would ask to those who are leveling that kind of pushback at business helping is, what choice does business have? And forget about business giving money to government. We'll never do that. And no money has been given to the president, by the way, Thabo. Whatever assistance that we give to government, it is in the form of capacity, it is in the form of expertise, it is in the form of skills, because the skills that are required to be able to implement the many plans that we have as a country that we are failing to implement reside in business. So what choice do we have, Thabo? Because when this thing falls apart, when we eventually do become a failed African state, all of us will be failures, you know, as a country. Business has got a lot to lose. You know, if you agree that business is the only social partner with disproportionate resources, you know, we therefore need to answer the question of how do we utilize our disproportionality for the betterment of the citizens of this country. And the best way in which business right now can intervene is to help with the implementation of the many plans that we actually have. So the resource mobilization fund that you have actually spoken about has really been set up to look at how we can actually get the much needed capacity for us to be able to give that capacity to the various structures that the president has put in place, you know, in the form of NECOM, in the form of Operation Bulingela, in the form of, you know, the failing municipalities, so that we give them the required skills that are needed to be able to implement these plans. So no physical money has actually exchanged hands, Thabo. That is not correct. And as I'm saying, when you look at the processes of government, when you look at how problematic the PFMA is, when you look at how long it takes for government to be able to effect simple procurement processes, it will be a waste for business to be giving government money. But I think, let's be honest, there is an issue of the endemic and systemic corruption that actually exists within government. So we are not comfortable to be giving money to treasury directly, but we are going to continue helping in other ways, you know, and as I'm saying, the greatest way in which we can help right now is the provision of skills and expertise that are required.
So you mentioned crime and corruption. As we speak now, you and I, the United Kingdom has decided to give Bain UK a break, right? And I had a conversation last week, I think, with Busisiwe Mavuso, who says, you want to see corruption. One of the most corrupt people in this country are business. And they avoid tax to start with. They take a whole lot of money, illicit financial flows out of this country. But you yourself are one of those people who said, well, we welcome PLSA into our fold. and they eventually left on their own accord. There's a hypocrisy in business to say, well, we want to fight crime and corruption, yet you're not fighting it just within your fold.
Far from it. I think we were the first organization, if you remember, to suspend the members that were actually involved in the state capture corruption. We were the first organization to actually call for the setting up, of the State Capture Commission. We were the first organization to actually make our members sign an integrity pledge, to say that we do commit that we're actually going to be running our businesses in an ethical manner. So, and we are the first organization to actually have accepted, and admitted that the state capture project got to the levels that it did because business was complicit. Otherwise the state capture project would not have been as widespread as it was. So business was definitely complicit. So I think there is no denying that, and I think we do accept that. We also do accept that those businesses, those executives that have actually been charged with corruption should be taken to jail. I mean, at the moment we are working with the capacitation of the National Prosecuting Authority, and we know that the assistance that we're giving them for them to be able to effectively prosecute is actually going to mean that CEOs, of not just public companies but private companies are actually going to be taken to court, as they should, Tabu. So I really think that the issue that we're making, and it was unfortunate that this was lost in translation, that I don't think that we can sit here and say that the architecture and system of business is inherently corrupt. What you do have is corrupt executives. What you do have is corrupt CEOs. And let's agree that the same company under a different leadership can actually conduct its business in an ethical manner. So we have suffered from the fact that you have had executive teams that have actually been mired in the corruption that was so prevalent in this country. Because, Thabo, we are a microcosm of this same country. So I think it is naive for the country to think that corruption will be so endemic and systemic and business will not be affected. Because these CEOs, these executives live in the same community that we all live in as South Africa. So if South Africa broadly, has got a corruption issue, then business, of course, will have a corruption issue as well. So I think that is the only point that we're actually trying to make. That doesn't actually make sense to want to shut down an entire company in an environment where poverty levels are more than 50%, in an environment where unemployment is more than 46% in terms of the expanded definition, where you have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. Does shutting down companies make sense? Or do you actually have to deal with effectively prosecuting those executives that were actually involved and make sure that this company, operates under the right leadership, which ensure that the company grows? Because in shutting down these companies, I think if you look at the case of Bain, for instance, I think there's about 200 employees, if I'm not mistaken. Only 10% of those are expats. The 180 are South Africans who will actually be joining the unemployment queues, should such companies shut down. Tabo, you're sitting in a country where the JSE is 60% foreign-owned, 60% multinationals, which means that if we are going to follow that thinking, that all these companies, and I mean, how many companies were involved in the state capture project? Too many to count. So are we going to shut them all down? Are we going to make all those people join unemployment queues? Shouldn't we rather be going after the executives that were actually involved in the state capture project and make sure that we deal with those and make sure that these companies have executives that are actually ethical and will run their companies in the right manner? Because if shutting down companies is the answer, then maybe we should start by shutting down government, because government has also been corrupt. And I think let's agree that the South Africa that we have was a different South Africa under Nelson Mandela, was a different South Africa under Thabo Mbeki, different South Africa under Jacob Zuma, and a different South Africa under Cyril Ramaphosa. And probably the systemic and endemic corruption that we have was not as prevalent under the Nelson Mandela days. So will the same argument, therefore, be true or hold true for government? Should we be shutting down government as well because they are saying they are systemically corrupt? Far from it, because you can get the right political leadership who is actually going to get South Africa out of this political rut. And that is what we should be focusing on. not shutting down institutions. I don't think that is the answer.
Back with you. Let's wrap up our conversation. Our Business Leadership South Africa CEO Busisiwe Mavuso still with us. We've touched on the energy, we've touched on crime and corruption. Let's just join the last two, maybe. We'll talk about transportation as well as water infrastructure. I mean, transportation means the roads have got to be fixed. Some of the roads in our local municipalities are appalling. I mean, some of the, never mind the national roads. But when you speak of water infrastructure, again, municipalities unable to take care of that. But what we are seeing are multi-party coalitions which are creating a whole lot of instability. How is business going to be able to play its role as a reliable social partner in that environment? Do you think it will hamper what you need to do?
So it will be quite, I mean, the instability that we're currently seeing is seriously problematic, Thabo. And I think the reason earlier on I was saying that a growing concern from the international community about South Africa is political stability. So our risk, our country risk has actually gone up from a political stability perspective. But then, Thabo, what choice do we have as South African citizens, and what choice do we have as business? Unfortunately, the one thing that we can't do is wish government away. So whatever government that gets ushered in 2024, business is going to have to try and find a way of working with it. Our commitment as business still stands, because we really do think that the expertise, the skills that are actually required to implement some of these interventions and the reform agenda that needs to be implemented, resides with business. I think our only hope is that there's not going to be any change in the reform agenda, because I think the reform agenda is what will make our environment conducive. A conducive environment is what will make business confidence to go up. Business confidence going up means that investment can come into the country. Investment coming into the country will mean that our economy can start growing at the right levels. Only when our economy starts growing at the right levels, Thabo, do we start to deal with the very high unemployment levels that we're actually sitting with as a country. And I think that is the only way in which you achieve, the much required jobs, in this environment. So business will continue to work with government. And to answer your question, yes, we are concerned, very concerned. And so is the international community, about the growing political risk in this country and growing political instability in this country.
Thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on. The CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, Busisiwe Mavuso.